That's okay. No worries.
Hi Andy, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
So, and I'm fine too, and thank you
Good.
very much for this opportunity to interview you. So,
No, you're very
friends,
welcome.
here is Andy Hunt for us. Andy works with people who have never felt good enough to accept and value themselves for who they really are. On this, he offers one-to-one therapy services, then training for lay people and professionals. He also writes articles and books about therapy and personal change. And there's a lot to know about Andy. We'll know about him directly. Okay, so Andy, how did you get into EFT?
Okay. Well, by accident mostly.
By
I did,
accident.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I did a few NLP courses back in 1999, 2000, and a couple of years later, I was on an NLP course, and someone I didn't like very much mentioned EFT, and I thought that sounds very weird. I wonder what that is, and I went to Gary Craig's website and downloaded the manual and tried it out for myself, and blow me down if it didn't actually work. So that's how I got started. So an accident, really. So and then I went and did the training and became a practitioner, and then again a trainer. So a happy accident.
Happy accident.
Yeah,
Wonderful. And Andy, you also combine NLP with your EFT practices. So
yeah.
combining NLP skills or having NLP skills
Hmm.
for the EFT practitioners, do you think it is helpful?
Well, I'm very biased, and I would say yes, of course it is. I'd say from my perspective, kind of the NLP way of thinking about the way the world works, the way people's mind works, is a very, very helpful kind of point of view
Hmm.
to understand what's going on with people. And the tapping is a very useful way to change what's going on with people. So it's, if you like, the NLP is my guidance system,
Hmm.
my GPS, and the tapping is actually the business of getting to where I want to go. So it's very helpful combination in my opinion.
Wow.
I,
And
I believe Gary Craig was an NLP practitioner before he developed
yes,
EFT as well. So I
yes.
kind of feel like if it's all right for him, it's all right for me.
It's a known truth that NLP has a very close relationship
Hmm.
with EFT. So yes,
Yeah.
yes. And here comes Andy. You have developed your own modality
Hmm.
called identity healing.
That's right. Yeah.
So could you please tell me what is the story behind it? What inspired you
Okay.
to develop that?
That's a kind of accident as well.
Oh my God! Wow!
I'm
Wonderful
I'm very
accidents. Happy
I'm very
accident too.
I'm very accident prone. Um, yeah, I was. It's a lot of things with EFT. The lot of kind of the deep stuff that really troubles people is it's hard to tap for um, because it's hard to get at. And I've done a couple of other trainings in different modalities, and I went on a training for something called eye movement. Let's hang on. Integrate
EMDR,
eye
eye
movement.
movement desensitization
Yeah, no,
reprocess.
no, not that one. A different one. IEMT. So integral
IEMT,
eye movement.
angioastins. Yes.
That's correct.
Mhm.
So I
Integral
did this
eye
training about 12 years ago,
movement.
and he had a question in as part of his routine that he'd got from someone else. So another happy accident. And it's when you say something like, I'm not good enough, or I am worthless. And he asks this really interesting question, which is, how old is the I in I'm not good enough? And the answer is always someone quite young, usually between 4 and 14. So it's like there's a part of us that's kind of stuck at that age with those kind of feelings. So I was fascinated by that. So of course, there's the eye movement integration, which I confess I wasn't very good at. It required a bit more skill than I had. But I got to thinking about this, the value of the question. So I've done NLP and I've done EFT. So the kind of the question how old is the I in I am, whatever it is, like I'm not good enough, I am stupid, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, all the other things that people say about themselves, which are not memories. They're kind of
Yes.
like as a part of themselves that has that job of being stupid or hopeless or helpless that kind of comes to the fore. So I started asking people, you know, how old is the I in I am stupid? And they would say, well, it's 4 or it's 6. And then because in NLP, there's a thing called parts work, where you work with parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So these parts that have kind of frozen in time. So I asked the people to kind of imagine that younger self. If you were to take, for example, I am stupid. If I was to take that I who's stupid, the 7-year-old I who's stupid, and put him outside in front of myself so I could see him, what would he look like? What would be going on in him or her? And the younger self is usually, well, invariably distressed. You know, they're feeling hopeless or worthless, or they're cowering, or they look ashamed, or they're not able to do anything. And so that I would tap for them, or they would tap for this younger version themselves. So it's kind of like surrogate tapping for a younger version of you.
Mm.
So that's how it kind of started. And originally, I just did the tapping for that younger self. And then it started to see that wasn't quite enough, because if you imagine being kind of growing up where you've been told you're stupid or something like that, and you have a part of yourself, say a 7-year-old part, that feels stupid. There's 2 parts to that. The first part is all the stress and distress of feeling stupid and not good enough, and kind of, the world's against me and people are telling me off, all that kind of. So there's all the stress and distress, which is what EFT is really, really good at, is taking care of stress and distress, just tapping it out. The second part of that is there are things that are missing that could have been there but weren't. So things like care, love, kindness, consolation, whatever it was that you needed at the time but didn't get, you still need those things. So I added the piece where you soothe all the stress and distress, and then you add the things that they need, which is unique to that 7-year-old. So it could be love, confidence, courage, compassion, self-respect, whatever it is, and you just add that to the younger self until they've got everything that they need. And then they kind of take all that on board. There's a kind of integration, and then invite them back into themselves, bring them back into yourself, and invite them to grow up. Because these parts of yourselves, these young parts of yourselves, the ones that don't know how to handle things or always feeling afraid, they're all much younger than you are. They don't have the benefit of your experience of wisdom. So in effect, what a lot of people are doing, they're allowing very young parts of themselves to run their lives. It's kind of like we're a lot of children in grown-up suits, you know, pretending to be adults, because they're kind of like stuck at that age. So I invite them to grow up, so they can become a whole person, a whole adult again. Does that make sense?
Yes,
That's a
yes.
very brief description.
Yeah, and I liked it because like usually it is said 0 to 7 or childhood beliefs rule even
Yeah,
the
yeah,
future of us. So
yeah. And you asked earlier on, you asked me about this thing about the matrix re-imprinting and stuff. The difference between this and, well, one of the many differences is this has nothing to do with memories.
oh, okay.
You don't have to find the memory of where you learned you were stupid. I mean, it might be that in the past you had a vivid memory of your father kind of looking out, you are so stupid, something like that, which is kind of obvious. Or it could be just the kind of drip, drip, drip over time of little hints and glances and looks and kind of the way people look at you and stuff like that made you think you're stupid, which is not a particular memory. So sometimes you can't find a memory that goes with that, but there's still the part of you that develops that has that thing going on. So you don't need the memory, in fact. And if memories turn up in the processing, you treat the memory in the normal way you treat a memory and then go back.
Okay.
So yeah, so no memories are required.
Wonderful. That's even awesome, because trying to go back to the client specific memory is quite a challenging thing.
Yes, that's an understatement.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's an understatement. It can be very, very challenging, and they might
Yes,
not have
yes,
access
yes,
to it.
yes, yes.
However, if somebody says, I'm stupid, and you just ask them quite innocently, how old is the I am stupid, the I in I am stupid, they invariably have an answer, and it's very quick. It's almost like that. So that gets around that whole problem.
Got it, got it. Because when did you learn? What were you doing? Do you remember this? When we're
Yes.
trying to go to specifics, like it kind of creates a lot of pressure that
Yes.
when in 0 to 7, I don't deny that
Mm.
the childhood memories are not
Oh
vivid,
yeah,
but
sure. Yeah.
not everyone is able to recall the childhood
No.
memories specifically.
No. And sometimes there are very good reasons why people can't remember things, and you don't want to kind of to mess with that really, because that's going to be deep and dangerous water. So you need to have a
Yes.
fair bit of skill with that. And the other thing, the question is, when do you remember this, is a kind of question for your conscious mind, which sometimes doesn't know and just makes stuff up. But your unconscious mind knows. That part of
Yes.
you, inside of you, knows. So
Very
it's,
interesting. This looks interesting. And
yeah.
you have developed two levels, like level 1 and level 2. How does
Yeah.
it go? Like,
Okay. So the first level is this thing about identifying the part of yourself that's stuck,
mhm,
all right, or parts of yourself that's stuck. This process of taking them out, soothing them, giving them what they need, the resources they need, and then bringing them back in together, bringing them back into you and helping them grow up. So that's the kind of the basic level.
mhm,
Um, and there's a kind of few extra bits around that, because this is has value for memories in a kind of unusual way. Oftentimes when people do EFT with memories, kind of traumatic memories or difficult memories, uh, they process the memory, and then there's still something that bothers them about the memory. So like, even though you've tapped on it and it seems like it's gone down, there's something that's still not, it's still.
yes.
And the reason, or I think, this is my theory, the reason is that the memory's disassociated, like they're on the outside looking in,
Mhm,
which is a common way of kind of protecting yourself from distress, is to kind of like step out of the memory and to look into the memory and see that younger version of you having all the struggle and the trouble and all the rest of it, because it feels doesn't feel as bad. And if you just tap for that, all you do is you tap the person who, the one who's observing, you soothe the observer. The young part of you is still distressed, which is what makes those memories so sticky. But you can tap for those, the younger part of you that you can see, you know, the little kid being told off, or the older person having the car accident, or whatever it is. And then you can do the same kind of process for them, tapping for them and giving them what they need, and then bringing them back in, which heals those memories. So there's those two things, main things in the level 1. In the level 2, it gets a bit more complicated, of course.
because so is the identity.
Sorry?
Hmm,
Well, yes, yeah. Well, no, the level 2 is to do with when there's more than one identity at play. So if you hear someone say to themselves, I hate myself, that's for example, or I give myself a hard time, you know, or yeah, I am punishing myself. So there are two identities in this one. There's the I, who's hating, and there's the myself, who's been
myself.
hated.
Yeah.
So there's two parts of you on the inside.
Mhm,
One's doing the hating, one's being hated. So you have to help both of those.
mhm,
And usually the I that's doing the hating is an older one, and the myself is a younger one. And the I is often a bit like a parent, angry parent.
mhm.
So you have to have a process for healing them individually and their relationship. So that's that part. So now you've got double trouble. So it's how to cope with that, because things get more complicated the more parts you have. So it's coping with that. And the next part, which is a bit similar to that, is healing the inner critic. If you have the critic the person inside your head giving you the hard time, it's healing the part of you that's criticized and the part of you that's doing the criticism. And finally, as if that wasn't enough, there's a third thing called, which I borrowed. My partner Karen was a cognitive analytic therapist, which is it's a style of therapy was developed in the UK and is mostly in the UK in the National Health Service. And there's an idea in that which is a very interesting idea called reciprocal roles, which is when you're growing up, you learn, say you've been bullied as a child, for example. So you learn how to be bullied because you're being bullied, of course, but because you're a great learner as a child, and so you also learn how to be a bully.
Yes, I have heard that a lot of
Yeah,
stories.
yeah. So inside there's a kind of part of you that's really good at being bullied, and there's a part of you that's really good at bullying, or there's a part of you that's really good at being criticized, and there's a part of you that's really good about being critical, because you learn both sides. And so oftentimes people will flip between the two. So people who've been criticized can often be very critical. It's like a seesaw kind of thing. You go from one side to the other. It's going to flip from one side to the other. And it's a bit limited. So the final part of the level 2 is to undo those reciprocal roles, to undo that. So nothing to it really.
And as due to pandemic, most of the trainings have turned into online. And
Yes.
why is this identity healing still offered face to
Okay.
face or live training than online?
Yeah, I think it would be very tricky to do online, basically because, and it's hard to do because I'm doing this face to face with you, but in the training, I'm teaching people to take or to imagine taking out their younger selves and putting them out in front of them. So this happens in 3D. Okay. So if I'm doing this, I'm kind of putting it outside of myself. There's a lot of non-verbal stuff because the idea of putting them on the outside is a very helpful separation. So you can see what's going on, but it happens in 3D. So it's not like the tapping is happening in, people tap, they're tapping on how they feel. Okay, which is fine if you're face to face, but you're tapping for yourself and someone else. So there's a 3D thing, and there's a lot of non-verbal stuff to do with how is that other person over there doing, what's going on for them, and pointing and gesturing and tracking non-verbals. And until somebody invents 3D Zoom, I can't imagine a way of doing it that wouldn't that would work. I think there's a lot of the principle's very simple. I think there's a lot of places you could mess this up, really, and I don't want people to go messing things up. It would be a shame for everyone.
And Andy, you have developed some products. One is the tapping toolkit. So could you
Yes.
just tell what
Okay.
is this toolkit about, and how do EFT practitioners can get benefited, or not just EFT
Okay.
practitioners, anyone who want to use it?
Okay. Well, I think one of the things I do is I can't help myself. I keep inventing things or thinking of different ways to do things. And
And it's accidents.
I know.
Happy accidents.
I can't help myself. Well, it requires a bit more thought than an accident. So I keep coming up with little tapping routines, or how could I use tapping for this? Like how could you use tapping to undo shoulds or beliefs or difficult relationships between people? So these are very heavily NLP influenced. There's kind of like, how can I apply tapping to NLP? So I'd write these up. Most of these are written on my website in articles from like well, 15 years ago now. Is it 15 years ago? My goodness. So quite a lot.
Yeah.
And also some of my thoughts about what's important in doing the right kind of mindset for doing good EFT for yourself. Because one of the things that's really nice about EFT is you can use it for yourself. So I think that's a great
Yes.
great advantage to EFT over things like EMDR and all the rest, which you cannot do for yourself. So I'm very interested in how people can self-help. So I wrote these articles and then kind of assembled them into a book with stuff like, so there's techniques and there's also perspectives that I think are helpful and that go against a lot of things that are present in EFT culture. I'm not convinced about things like tapping scripts, tap-alongs and that kind of stuff. I'm not convinced that they're very helpful because they're about generalities. They're not about you as an individual.
Yes.
So I'm interested, how can you get to something that would help somebody get to something in them as an individual and help them change it in a way that's safe? So I kind of compiled the book as sort of, some of them are self-help and some of them are kind of ideas for practitioners. So the book itself, the English version, is available on the tappingtoolkitbook.com is where you'll find it. There is a Spanish version, which another EFTer who's from Colombia has very kindly translated and will probably be released in the next week or two.
Wow.
And there's a French and a German version in the works as well. Because the people have approached me and said, we'd really like to translate this.
Amazing.
Which is very, it's very touching. It's always nice to meet a reader. It's extraordinary to meet a reader who wants to do the hard work of translating it. So that's that book. So there's a kind of, and people can get it from that website in an ebook or a physical, good old-fashioned paper book, while those still exist.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's that one.
Yeah,
So it's about 300 pages and about 20, 25, 30 different chapters or techniques. So quite a lot of stuff.
Yes, yes, I could understand.
But no scripts.
No scripts.
And no motivational stories. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, don't buy that book. It'll be terrible. You'll hate it.
Yes, it may disappoint.
Yes, it will disappoint. Yes.
And there is the get out of your own way.
Oh
What is
yeah.
this product about? Could you please explain?
That's my first attempt at writing a book. So not quite as polished as the second one. That's about all the ways we kind of impede our process, the ways we have limiting beliefs and blocks and shoulds and can'ts and all the rest of it that kind of hold us in place. So I wanted to write a book that was about how to identify those blocks for yourself and how to work with them. Because the trouble with our own blocks is we can't see them.
Yes.
Really, all this stuff that's holding us back is invisible on the inside. It might be visible to someone on the outside, like a practitioner might be able to see it, but for ourselves, it's not. It's just the water we swim in. You know, we're not aware of it at all. So I wanted to write a book that helped people identify some of those things that were holding them back. So it's a kind of step-by-step, another NLP-oriented thing to help people to identify all those kind of limiting beliefs, the can'ts, the shouldn'ts, the mustn'ts, all those kind of stuff that holds people in place, and then to give them some tapping to do stuff with. So that's must be about 10 years old now, I think. So that's that's an oldie, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Yes, Sandy.
No, I was just going to say those are the two so far. Maybe I'll have to do something else.
Maybe something on identity. One more thing. This identity manual, a part of identity
Yes.
level 1 manual.
Yeah.
Could you please tell about the downloading part and all?
Yeah, sure. If you go to identityhealing.com, which is a kind of the website of it, there is a place where you can download a part of the manual just to tell you a little bit about the background behind it and how it works. Not to tell you how to do it, because I think that does needs a training. Really, you need to be coached into that. So, but just to give people a flavour of it. And even though I can't see a way of training it online, it's certainly possible to do it online. You have to make some a little bit of adaptations, but it's personally to work one-to-one with someone. Most of my clients are on Zoom, and I use it on Zoom, so it's possible to do it using Zoom, just not the teaching bit, sadly. If I can figure out a way of doing it, I will, but haven't got inspired yet.
Awesome. So that was very inspiring to know about identity healing. Wonderful gift for the practitioners. So, do you think this EFT practitioners or any other coaches, is it mandatory that one needs to be an EFT practitioner to learn identity healing? And
I think it is it mandatory? It's highly recommended because because it is based on EFT. So if you understand EFT, then that's helpful. It would be too much hard work to teach someone EFT and then go on to the identity healing. So if you've done EFT before and you know how EFT works and you know the kind of things that go on in people when you do EFT, then it's kind of a lot of what happens in the identity healing is kind of understandable. You have a kind of frame for understanding it. If you came into it cold, a lot of what happens in EFT would be mysterious to you because all sorts of strange things happened in EFT that unless you've tried it, you wouldn't be able to anticipate it. So it's a requirement, and also it's a requirement to be in an organization that is a kind of a professional organization. So there's that kind of, the skills are resting on something. So I don't think as a kind of, if somebody turned up to say, I've never done any EFT, I don't have any kind of skills, I just want to learn identity healing, I would turn them down, I think.
Okay, got it.
Really, just because you need a fair bit of skill in it, I think.
And Andy, here is one more question. Could you please share any of the case studies that you remember who got benefited out of identity healing and any case study? I've seen so many.
Yeah, I hate this question because I've got a terrible memory. So what happens is I do the session and I'm completely involved in the session. It's wonderful. And then I forget what's happened. Okay. So give me a moment to try and think about that. Okay, well, yeah, here's one that's a little bit unusual, but it's one that comes to mind. And this is someone who had nightmares.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And the tapping stuff that we were doing wasn't working for the nightmares. So I asked her, how old is the you who has the nightmares? And she said 3. So we tapped for the 3-year-old who was having the nightmares, and the nightmares stopped.
Oh, wow.
So, which I thought was, I wasn't expecting that result. I thought this is, well, who knows what could, who knows what to try. So that's the one that springs to mind. I must do a better job of writing down example ones because it's a kind of, there's a lot of good stuff. The thing is that the people I work with, I've usually got a lot of these troubled younger selves running around. People talk about their inner child. I think that's a huge underestimate. I think we have an inner primary school of children who are kind of young parts that are struggling to get along. So it gets complicated in there, I think.
No, I got it. Yeah.
I should have revised a better example, but that's the one that springs to mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because generally we are tapping. There is something remaining, and tapping on 3-year-old, and then the problem is gone was excellent example. It was nice.
Yeah, yes, I was quite surprised of myself, so that's nice as well.
Wow, nice. So, Andy, thank you very much for giving your time and briefing about identity, how it helps, and how EFT practitioners can get benefited by adding identity healing to their toolkit, so that they
Right.
can work with their clients at much deeper level. And I like your perspective about the tapping toolkit without scripts and without motivational stuff.
It's a pet
And
hate.
yes, and
No
and I also like it is self help as well as for practitioners. Yeah,
miracle.
and you were telling something.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it's no miracle cures. Lots of hard work. You'll get the results from doing the hard work, I'm afraid. So
Amazing. So that was very nice talking to you, Andy, and it was
likewise.
wonderful knowing about the identity healing
Okay.
modality. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. I hope
Thank you.
your folks find it interesting.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. So